Hello, everyone. This is a brief overview of your POI paper. This is going to be written individually or with one or two partners. If you write it with one or two partners, remember you have to fill out that extra document. So as you can see, it says this is one of your longer papers in the class, but it requires less critical thinking than some of your other papers. The page limits are guidelines, but the total pages at the end will be addressed, and I will not read beyond that total page limit. You're going to submit 3 documents. Um, you should have references and in-text citations. The first document is your paper with a title page per APA. The second document will be your appendices or important documents. And the third is a reference list. Please make sure you follow directions and submit 3 separate documents. So these are the required sections of your paper, and you are required to use the headings that I've listed. Your use of these headings allows me to more efficiently grade your papers. So first it says you need an introduction to the paper and summary of the paper. This will be approximately 1 page total. Part 1 of this paper is called Planning, and it has 3 sections. You can write it in narrative, or you can put it into a chart. No longer than 3.5 pages, and that is way more than what you really need. So the first part of this section is called Planning and Health Education. In this section, you're going to identify an expert in the field or a model or 2 that support your planning of your health education event. Make sure that whatever model you choose, you thoroughly understand and use correct terminology in explaining how it is used in planning and health education. The second part of the second section of part 1 is our planning. And in this section, you need to briefly describe how your group planned. It might be a chart or it might be narrative, and that should be no more than 1 page. And finally, the critique of planning. You will look at your expert and you will look at what your group did, and then you will critique, did your group do this correctly? Did you plan your event correctly? You need to address if you did it correctly, what did you do correctly and how would you repeat it? And if you didn't do it correctly, what went wrong? And I'm looking to see how you could avoid it. So this is an example of how to put these 3 sections into a chart. You may use a chart or you may use narrative, but do not do both. That is says right here. You can either do a narrative or a chart, but do not do both. If you do both, you will lose points. Okay, so this is just an example of phase 1 of the needs of PPM. You would put the phase, what they say should occur, explain what you did, and then compare them. If you did not do this, then you would put, we did not do the social assessment, and then you would critique and explain how to correct it. At the end of this section should be 1 to 2 paragraphs describing how you would replicate success and avoid issues you had in this project in future settings. So 3 parts. Planning correctly, the way you planned, critique of planning, and at the end of the critique of planning, this 1 to 2 paragraphs explaining how you would replicate the successes you had and how you would avoid any pitfalls or failures or problems you had. Again, this section is narrative or chart, and then this right here, these last 2 items, the paragraphs must be narrative. Part 2, strategies for teamwork. This also can be narrative or chart. It's no longer than 6 pages, and that is way more than what you need. You are going to identify 6 to 8 strategies we used, and these strategies must be designed to address team planning processes or making your team or group work more effectively. Do not list planning strategies. You're looking for strategies that address making the team planning process better, or making your group work more effectively. You're going to identify the strategy, explain why we did it, tell whether or not it worked. If it worked, why? If it didn't, why? Um, then we're looking for how you could replicate it. How do you replicate the success in your internship or work? And if it didn't work, how would you fix it in internship or work? So this is one example. This is an example of a strategy that you may not use in your paper. So this is the narratives. It talks about one strategy that was supposed to work. We're posting of team minute notes. So this is the strategy. You may not use that in your paper within 2 days of the meeting. The purpose of this was to do this. This did not work for our group because 3 of the 5 people never read the minutes and kept calling Sasha and me for information. The way to resolve it, maybe if Sasha and I referred them back to the minutes, they would have started to use them. Another way we could have addressed this was they can also allow the supervisor to observe the progress without attending meetings. By posting them, everyone can check. This helps the team run more effectively. So it does all the things it's supposed to do. What is the strategy? What was it supposed to do? Did it work? How to fix it or how to replicate it. Here is an example of the exact same item but in chart form. The posting of team minutes. Did it work? Why or why not? An application. It does not matter to me if you do narrative or you do a chart, but do not do both, one or the other. Part 3 is implementation. This is no more than 1 page. It has 2 parts. Either part could be a narrative or a list. The first question you have to answer is, what were the 5 most critical elements in implementing your program? And the second question is, how did you reach diverse learners with your activity? So no more than a page, narrative, or a list. Part 4 are problems and analysis, and this is no more than 3 pages. What you're going to do is you're going to identify 3 to 5 items. They could either be problems or successes that occurred, why they occurred, and how you could fix them. So you would either say this was a potential problem, it did not happen, this is why it did not happen. Or you could say this is a problem that occurred, this is why it happened, and this is how to fix it. The page numbers, again, this could be written as a narrative or a chart. Do not do both. And the page numbers above are guidelines. The maximum allowed pages are 14.5 pages. That's 12-point font double spaced. The title page is not in that 14.5 page total. There's no page limit on attachments. So your first document is your paper. The second document are attachments or appendices. And the third document is your reference list. Maximum pages allowed, 14.5. I will not read more than that. So if you have 15.5 pages, the last page will not be read, and you'll lose points for anything that I do not read. Again, this is a relatively easy paper compared to some of the other work you do in this class. It is time intensive. It takes a lot of time to pull all of this together, but it does not require as much critical thinking as some of the other papers. If you have questions, please make sure you ask. I do look forward to reading your work. Again, you can work in groups of 2 or 3. If you work as an individual, you will submit 3 documents. If you work in a group, you will submit a 4th document, which is your review of each of your peers' work.